happening in the hotel industry. And we have here one of the top experts across the region. She has advised on more than 5,000 hospitality and mixed-use projects in the last 20 years across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And she works across valuations, acquisitions, asset management, strategic investments and development, contract negotiations, and general real estate strategic advisory. She is an alumni of Harvard, Cornell, and Essex business schools and has authored more than 50 publications, in addition to speaking frequently at investment and hospitality related conferences on a range of topics. She has also recently received the Industry Excellence Award in consideration of her ongoing commitment and contribution to the industry. Please welcome Ms. Hala Chofani, who is the, she is the president of HVS Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. Welcome, Ms. Hala.
Thank you, Shane. Lovely to be here with you. Coming in last on this talk, I'm going to have to spice it up to keep the other participants. So thank you for everyone who's still there.
Yeah, we expect nothing less but the spiciest of spices from you. But I was scared to get your title wrong because you're in so many different geographies, Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. So that's a huge expanse across that area. And one of the favorite industries here has to be, you know, the hotels, right? I think once you're a family group, you have to have a hotel or two in your portfolio, and some of them have more than that. So excited to talk to you about what's happening in this area. So what does the future of the hotel industry look like? Are we getting oversaturated, or is there, I think literally across from my office, they're building another 5-star hotel, like literally 100 feet from us. And we already have a JW Marriott here. We have an Oberoi, we have Anantara, we have a Taj, and they're like, well, we need one more. So is it oversaturated? Is it not? What can we expect? What's the trend?
The simple answer is not, and I'll tie it back to when I first arrived in Dubai, I think 2000, when there were only 1,500 keys, and today we have 150,000 keys in Dubai only, with very solid performance, very solid occupancy. So again, just for the benefit of giving a bit of a quick micro view of this sector, I mean, clearly travel and tourism is growing globally, but I think more importantly, me personally, having worked also across different continents, including Europe, Asia, and in the last 15 years, Middle East and Africa, there is no better time in terms of both development and opportunities than the Middle East region, right? So looking at it from a real estate standpoint, but also from an operational standpoint. And, you know, when we zoom at the GCC in particular, I mean, clearly we will all agree that Dubai, the UAE, has done indisputable success. So today, when we talk about the UAE, there is, as you rightly said, I mean, hotels continue to pop up, but demand continues to grow. So we've got Dubai, Abu Dhabi, RAK really competing on the global map. But just now, next door, we have the second wave of transformation and the significant change that is happening in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Some of it is underway, but clearly the outlook looks at much more of a development, which will also serve as a catalyst, right? So personally, I think the future outlook is quite promising. Quite competitive. I mean, it's not all very rosy, right? It's quite competitive because today we're not necessarily competing between the JW and the Ritz. We're competing between countries and not just on a cross-border. We're competing down with Egypt and Morocco and Turkey, and perhaps that's where my involvement with so many different continents, just seeing it from a destination standpoint. But the outlook is positive. It is competitive, which I think then ties nicely into what we're going to be discussing now around how do we make sure that we do have the right strategic direction, we're doing the right investments, the way we're executing, and you know, how do we operate in such a competitive and sophisticated environment?
Right. Yo, that's amazing. So when you were in Dubai 2001, it was 1,500 keys, and now we have 150,000. That's just Dubai, or?
Yeah, and that's only Dubai, and that's probably another 10,000, so another 10% growth in the next couple of years. And specifically, that was adding the Grand Hyatt down by the Grand Hyatt was 600 keys. And, you know, the question was, this is going to double supply. What's going to happen? And, if we talk about success stories, we've seen the likes of Jumeirah setting up very successfully. We've looked at hotel companies such as Rotana taking home and based in the UAE, but then also being able to expand regionally and perhaps more recently internationally. So there has been a lot of definitely growth from a real estate standpoint, less so perhaps from an operating model standpoint when we compare to the presence of the international groups. But overall, the opportunity is there. It's just making sure that, as with any other sector, this is rather much more long-term sustainable investments that we are doing.
And so how will the local players stand up to the heat, the searing fires of the international multinationals as they come in? I mean, do you feel that the local groups at the board level have the right configuration? I mean, we always say in our business that CEOs can't succeed where boards fail. And, you look at some of the international companies, they'll have, maybe a tech guru from Google or from Facebook or whatever on their board. They'll really have kind of the best of the best. And then, you come into the Middle East and there's a reluctance of the family group sometimes to bring in outsiders into the board. There's obviously going to be family members there. Are they set up at the board level to win this fight? Are they positioned for the win at the board level, or what's your perspective on the hotel boards in this region?
Sure, and I'm going to start off with a disclaimer just by being an advisor that my observations are rather interacting with boards. I mean, I clearly sit on a couple of boards, but this is rather a function of my sense and having worked with boards over the last 15 years. Perhaps the major shift and change that I can share today is what has been happening in the last 5 years, but also to put things in context, because it wouldn't be fair to actually address whether the local boards can compete with the international boards or they're at the same level. I mean, international boards, we all know they have much longer history. They have managed to iron out many of the issues that today perhaps Middle Eastern groups and GCC family groups are trying to iron out as they go through this transition. But one thing that is more relevant to the hospitality ownership structure in this part of the world, and I think it's very important that we address, is the fact that for most part of these either owning companies or operating companies, these are family companies. And therefore, as we both would agree, Shane, there are certain challenges that still need to be ironed out. And again, I mean, without going into too much detail, but perhaps the few that we're having to manage, and we being as advisors, is really looking at it from the standpoint of we're going from a generation to another generation. So there has been a lot of wealth, and preserving that wealth is understandable. And some have succeeded by just being reactive, not even proactive, although today we call for proactive strategic direction. So that's one. Then you've got the younger family members that are basically saying, let's go into acquisitions, investments, let's add vertical lines, let's just go out there and do things differently. And perhaps many of us on the call today sit somewhere in between to say, okay, let's see how we can ease off this tension or conflict. So I think I just wanted to put this out there because it's one of those that even earlier on ties into what Sultana said and Fadi with regards to family members. How do you deal with that? Because clearly there are different interests and there's no right and wrong. It's a question of, do we want to grow? Do we want to change our business model? Is there an opportunity and do we want to step into it? And it is not an easy, straightforward exercise, right? So that's, that's one thing to really acknowledge about the local groups. And because of the way they are structured, at many times, and without generalizing, some of those decisions are very emotional. Like in the finance world, we say it's egoistic investments or emotional investments. Perhaps the better term would be the emotional attachment to what they stand for and what they're aspiring to become. So today, these groups, to answer questions directly, they're not expected to compete at the international level. The way we work with those groups is to actually redefine or reassess or reestablish their identity and the strategic direction they're taking and what do they need to do, and whether they have this right sort of board composition, board mix, who do they need to employ, what do they need to do differently. Perhaps, governance is one of also the areas in which, because the decision making is done in a traditional manner or a different manner, let's put it this way, there isn't governance and accountability. And therefore, so far, this hasn't been really a key focus. But just to wrap up on this point, is my sense, at least in the last 3 years, is that for most parts of the groups that have strong, aggressive expansion plans, they've realized that there is a need to have functional boards, to have diversified boards, hire specialized board member, whether it's from the international community or people with regional experience, to actually ensure that they are able to deliver on that growth and ultimately potentially compete with the international brands.
Right. Well, I mean, I think there is something also to be said for the family groups, because while they might not have some of those kind of celebrity board members that filter in and out of the boardroom, they have loyalty, they have dedication, they have commitment, they have a blood oath to the brand, which is quite stronger. And then you see some of these celebrity boards fail, like in these big scandals, like the Theranos one, where they were supposed to do blood testing with a drop of blood and tell what you were. I think you had some of the biggest business names on that board, and didn't really help them. So I think it's an interesting.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because again, when you look at really, the sense of staying true to the identity or aligning of the identity and the vision, it is those board members who have been behind or very much involved and hands-on, the ones that really understand what the essence of that business is, and their loyalty lies in really pushing it forward. So it's always about balancing it, right? I think just getting the right mix so that you can eliminate the emotional side of things and the conflicts, and really being able to just then work with a much more effective setup and board structure.
Yeah. So I guess one of the interesting things is, who are we as a company? And I find all my clients now are coming to me, and they're real estate developers, and they're saying, no, we're a tech company, or we're a software company. And it doesn't matter really who you are. Everybody wants to be, sexy tech, the next Zuckerberg or whatnot. Unfortunately, obviously, I missed that boat dramatically. But some of my boards in the hotel business, one board member says, hey, we're actually a real estate developer. Our real strength is picking great locations and building, iconic properties that people want to stay in. And, the next board member says, no, we're really a hotel management company, and our strength is training people, developing people to deliver that service better than anyone else in this region. And then the third guy pipes up and says, no, we're a tech company, and our strength is really driving digital revenue, and our ability to fill a hotel with our online booking system is really the way we need to go. And so you have all three of them, and all three of these guys are in the exact same business, but totally different perspectives. Do you feel this identity is becoming a growing issue as we kind of mature into, the unknown of what's going to happen now in the next few years?
Well, definitely, I agree with you, and that's something we observe as well. And perhaps this goes back to suggesting that, if each board member thinks about the identity differently, then it's going to be very hard to really be able to draw out your strategic mapping and even execute on it. But it is not uncommon, right? So what I'm saying, you're right, it's not uncommon, because, when I sit with boards discussing an opportunity or a strategy, I definitely hear the different perspectives, and it's as if everyone has his own agenda or interest. And that's what I think also is not uncommon on boards, where you have either your different perspectives or your different interests. I mean, to some extent, it is the ego that goes into being associated with certain projects. So, but that the chances of succeeding with such, a disconnected and dysfunctional board is minimal, right? So the idea here is that we definitely need to align. One thing for sure, I mean, and also in recognizing the times that we operate in, agility becomes even more important, right? We all talk about being flexible and agile, which somehow, to the point that was discussed earlier on, I mean, there are your teams and CEOs that need to be pretty much up to date with what's happening, but on a very strategic board level, you need to remain focused until such point in time when there is no harm in going back and reassessing the identity of the company. But that's not something that is expected to happen overnight or within a year or even two. Where I often find concerns is that many of the ideas and those attributing to certain identities or identifying what we want to become is not necessarily based on well-grounded, data-driven research analysis. It is more around actually, a friend, business partner, they've done that, they've succeeded, perhaps there's an idea. And I relate it back all to the hospitality industry. And just to give a very simple example, because another individual or firm were able to roll out an operating company, we should all be able to roll out an operating company. Why can't we? Well, I mean, there's just so much that needs to go into making that decision to become an operating company, right? Versus being a holding company with different brands. So there are opportunities and opportunities that might look sexier and better and quicker, but I think it is also extremely true that you remain focused on the identity. I mean, one of the examples that I use and I hope there are no operators on this call, but I challenge them, is that once upon a time, the big international brands were selling service, brand, exclusivity, personalized service. Today, they sit and pitch that they have the best booking platform. So suddenly, instead of delivering on a promise, you are now basically saying we're better than Booking.com or Expedia. Are you really? So there is also some harm with actually changing the narrative, to your point, Shane, but alignment amongst board members on that is extremely important. That's why I think, when we discuss about the right mix, there ought to be a very clear expectations of what board members are signing up to and believing and supporting the vision so that everyone remains focused in somehow what is similar interests for the company.
So let me turn it over to the audience here. Now we have Mr. Amr Badruddin with a question for you. Amr, are you still here?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes. Hello,
There
Mr.
we
Fani.
go.
How are you today?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm really interested as you being a subject matter and expert subject matter. Is green investment appealing to the family groups? And how can we accelerate the conversation from climate financing to green financing, which seems to be more appealing to investment, as green investments are in the category of safe, secure. So, and do you think this will mitigate the gap that is current in order to reach the 2030 SDG goals?
Great. So there were a couple of questions here. I'll try to address them one at a time. You can remind me. But the very first question was more around the greenfield projects versus existing, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it really depends on the market cycle, market opportunity. So we see in Saudi Arabia, for example, by far the majority is greenfield projects or to some extent brownfield. And therefore, the investment is much more focused there, whereas in the UAE, because of the maturity of the market, it is now perhaps more around acquisitions. With that said, I mean, if we look at some of the big funds, when they look to solidify their portfolio or increase their value, what they did acquire either existing companies related to the hospitality space or acquired hotels. So the preference then would be for income generating assets versus greenfield. So it is not the most favored approach, income generating assets. It really depends on market cycle. The next question was around financing, was it? Around
Yes, like how do we accelerate it from climate financing to green financing, green infrastructures like green bonds, and because this seems to be more appealing to investment, as the vocabulary in climate financing is like, it's not
I'll
it's
be
not
very
reaching.
transparent with you. I mean, I wouldn't be able to comment at length at this. I know that between the traditional financing model and all the other new derivatives, this by far is not yet in practice. I mean, it sounds like the right thing. It sounds like if you were to invest in sustainable practices, that you will have better preferential rates. But in reality, there isn't enough evidence to suggest that this has now overtaken. For most part of it, it is still very much traditional financing. In Europe, for example, versus here, there is much more debt financing that goes into these projects, whereas in this part of the world, perhaps there's more equity financing, and that's where it's quite different. But yes, there is much more sophisticated financing coming into play. Not so much yet, to be fair, relevant in the hospitality industry. It may be applicable more in other industries than ours at this stage.
Thank you so much for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane.
Sure. Okay, so let's just get one last question. I don't know if Mr. Kuhn Theonis, I don't know how to say his name properly. Am I saying that correct? Kuhn Theonis, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't think he's here. Okay, maybe he's gone. Okay, well, that is, thank you so much. I mean, I find it really exciting industry because obviously I'm a user of the product, and you can see how it has really evolved. And today I think our selection of hotels is probably best in the world. I mean, what's your opinion? How do we rank? Do you think, where does Dubai rank in terms of?
Absolutely, they've raised the bar so high. It's made it very difficult to beat it. Very, genuinely, they've raised the bar. I think the expectation is only becoming even higher. I mean, oftentimes when we look at the Saudi traveler, they're well traveled now. They're quite sophisticated. They've been to Dubai, so even delivering in their home, which is Saudi, is another level altogether. It's like, how can you top what they already have experienced and know? But it is exciting, very exciting industry. Perhaps the one thing, just tying it back to the board discussion that we were having, Shane, it is one of those industries that, although it's real estate naturally, but once you've built it, it's an income producing asset, in the sense that oftentimes where we're seeing some of the incoming boards today are having to inherit some of the bad investments that were made. I mean, this is very capital intensive industry and quite seasonal. It's not mainstream. And as exciting as it is, I mean, it does require good expertise to be able to govern the growth strategies for those groups.
Yeah, well, it is interesting. What would you say the historic champion for the hotel industry was? Was it New York City was kind of the top dog in the global community, or?
It was, I mean, definitely we had New York, we had London, and more recently we see Dubai up there, which is great. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, when you look at the region and solid performance of RevPAR, Dubai is definitely making it in amongst the top 5, which again is a good testament to what has been done in the last 15 years.
Thanks to professionals like you churning out all this great work, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. I guess we'll have to catch you hopefully at one of the 5-star luxury hotels, I'm sure, as you are sitting there advising your clients on what to do next to just out the competition. And for anybody who wants to follow up with Mrs. Hala, you can reach her on LinkedIn, I believe, right, is the best way for them to reach out to you.
Right.
So great. Thank you so much for sharing your time, and we appreciate it. And thanks so much for all of our guests who have come, and a big thanks to Hakama, the Institute of Governance, our partner for the event, who's really kind of the leader in terms of any kind of training certification that you'd want for any of the board members out there. And it's really a pleasure being part of it. And again, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just a caveat that I have been capped because I have over 30,000 contacts on LinkedIn, so I can't connect with anyone. So I just have to follow you. So if I'm not connecting, don't take it personally. Thank you so much. And
Well,
with
thank
that,
you for having me, and thank you for all the participants. Have a good evening.
Okay, masalama. Bye for now.
Goodbye.